musik kelas 3 SMA dan lagi golek kampus, ojo skip video iki. Yo iki Universitas Wijaya Kusuma Surabaya sing lagi duwe program sehari jadi mahasiswa. Cuma nang kene awakmu iso nyoba jadi mahasiswa sak dinoana Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis secara gratis. Nah, acarane iki mulai tanggal 16 Mei meneh. Persyaratane gampang banget, cukup klik link sing ono nang Instagram @feb.ueks.official dan isi registrasi lewat Google Form kae melu seleksine. Sawise iku langsung teko ae nang kampuse. Pas arep mlebu aku wis disambut karo mahasiswa sing ono nang lobi lho.
Monggo sing jas alma mater yo.
Siap tok Mas. Tara wah boys pore. Ayo Mas eksplor kampuse. Iki lobi utamane yo rek. Ono area lungguhan sing nyaman dan cocok kae nyantai bareng kancamu. Terus penjero maneh sik ono lobi FEB. By the way aku isi form pendaftaran dhisik yo rek. Sadurunge lanjut eksplor kampuse. Pertama aku mampir nang ruang kelas aksese ono lift lo. Pas mlebu ternyata ruangannya nyaman banget. Terus aku yang mampir nang ruang kelas S2 utawa magister. Ternyata kelasnya lebih boys pol. Next ono ruang lab komputer, lab akuntansi, pajak, pasar modal, ekspor, impor dan lab bahasa Inggris sing kalah boys. Ruang fasilitas liyane ono hall kampus sing iso 800 uang. Nah, lagi perpustakaane. Terus ono ruang kuliah bersama model teater sing iso gawe seminar workshop, bahkan yudisium dan muat sampai 300 uang. Ono lapangan basket atau voli, kafe gailan, utawa nyantai, masjid sing luas kayak ibadah. Sampai ono tugu utawa replika candi Boko sing iso digawe spot foto sing keren pol. Akeh benefite lek misal join nang FEB UWKS mulai teko sertifikasi bahasa Inggris British Council Surabaya. Terus bakal iso dadi influencer dan marketer. Soale nang FEB iki ono matkul unggulan yaiku digital marketing. Lokasine ono nang Duku Pakis Kupang XXW strip 54. Info liyane follow ae @feb.ueks.official. Gawe wa musik kelas 3 SMA dan lagi golek kampus, ojo skip video iki. Yo iki Universitas Wijaya Kusuma Surabaya sing lagi duwe program sehari jadi mahasiswa. Cuma nang kene awakmu iso nyoba jadi mahasiswa sak dinoana Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis secara gratis. Nah, acarane iki mulai tanggal 16 Mei meneh. Persyaratane gampang banget, cukup klik link sing ono nang Instagram @feb.ueks.official dan isi registrasi lewat Google Form kae melu seleksine. Sawise iku langsung teko ae nang kampuse. Pas arep mlebu aku wis disambut karo mahasiswa sing ono nang lobi lho.
Monggo sing jas alma mater yo.
Siap tok Mas. Tara wah boys pore. Ayo Mas eksplor kampuse. Iki lobi utamane yo rek. Ono area lungguhan sing nyaman dan cocok kae nyantai bareng kancamu. Terus penjero maneh sik ono lobi FEB. By the way aku isi form pendaftaran dhisik yo rek. Sadurunge lanjut eksplor kampuse. Pertama aku mampir nang ruang kelas aksese ono lift lo. Pas mlebu ternyata ruangannya nyaman banget. Terus aku yang mampir nang ruang kelas S2 utawa magister. Ternyata kelasnya lebih boys pol. Next ono ruang lab komputer, lab akuntansi, pajak, pasar modal, ekspor, impor dan lab bahasa Inggris sing gak kalah boys. Ruang fasilitas liyane ono hall kampus sing iso 800 uang. Nah, lagi perpustakaane. Terus ono ruang kuliah bersama model kayak teater sing iso gawe seminar workshop, bahkan yudisium dan muat sampai 300 uang. Ono lapangan basket utawa voli, kafe gailan, utawa nyantai, masjid sing luas kayak ibadah. Sampai ono tugu utawa replika candi Boko sing iso digawe spot foto sing keren pol. Akeh benefite lek misal join nang FEB UWKS mulai teko sertifikasi bahasa Inggris British Council Surabaya. Terus bakal iso dadi influencer dan marketer. Soale nang FEB iki ono matkul unggulan yaiku digital marketing. Lokasine ono nang Duku Pakis Kupang XXW strip 54. Info liyane follow ae @feb.ueks.official. Gawe wa musik kelas 3 SMA dan lagi golek kampus, ojo skip video iki. Yo iki Universitas Wijaya Kusuma Surabaya sing lagi duwe program sehari jadi mahasiswa. Cuma nang kene awakmu iso nyoba jadi mahasiswa sak dinoana Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis secara gratis. Nah, acarane iki mulai tanggal 16 Mei meneh. Persyaratane gampang banget, cukup klik link sing ono nang Instagram @feb.ueks.official dan isi registrasi lewat Google.
Jangan
Hidup berlalu tanpa makna, pancarkan kartikamu, memanusiakan manusia. Tabulaku sabar, sederhana, penuh syukur, menuai bahagia untuk berbagi pada sesama. Itulah mutiara kehidupan. Ingat, ingat selalu pelita perilaku ekologismu. Nyalakan lestari lingkungan dalam mengalamkan alam. Merajut saling kasih, memberi, memaafkan, berbingkai tindak, ikhlas dan berserah diri kehadiratnya. Itulah
Mohon perhatian, sebelum acara seminar dimulai, dimohon untuk mengaktifkan mode silent pada telepon seluler masing-masing. Dan diharapkan bagi seluruh tamu undangan dapat mengikuti acara dari awal hingga akhir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Risti Indah Nurhaliza and my partner.
Muhammad Syahradharma.
It's a precious chance for us to be your master of ceremony on a special occasion, International Guest Lecture, situating the role of English in global business communication. We would like to welcome Dr. Rakib Chaudhary, BA, MA, MEd, PhD from Monash University, Australia, as our special speaker today at Cultural Campus, Wijaya Kusuma University, Surabaya.
Yang kami hormati para Wakil Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya.
Yang kami hormati Kaprodi dan Seprodi Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya.
Yang kami hormati Bapak, Ibu dosen dan staf Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya.
Dan yang kami cintai hadirin yang telah hadir di Bangsal Pancasila maupun yang bergabung via Zoom meeting pada pagi hari ini.
Selamat datang di acara Seminar International Guest Lecture dengan tema Situating the Role of English in Global Business Communication yang dilaksanakan pada hari ini, Selasa 13 Juni tahun 2023 di Bangsal Pancasila.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we come to the main session, let us start this agenda by praying first.
Hadirin yang berbahagia, sebelum memasuki rangkaian acara, marilah kita mulai acara ini dengan membaca doa, agar acara yang akan kita laksanakan hari ini dapat berjalan dengan lancar dan tanpa hambatan apapun. Berdoa menurut keyakinan masing-masing, disilahkan. Berdoa selesai.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the national anthem of Indonesia Raya and the hymn of Wijaya Kusuma University.
Menyanyikan lagu kebangsaan Indonesia Raya dan himne Wijaya Kusuma. Hadirin dimohon berdiri.
Di sana aku berdiri, jadi
Hadirin disilakan duduk kembali.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the opening of the ceremony, we present a traditional dance, Dari Mahameru, which represented by the student of Wijaya Kusuma University, Surabaya.
Hadirin sekalian, sebagai pembuka acara, kami persembahkan Tari Mahameru yang akan dibawakan oleh mahasiswi Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya. Tari Mahameru berasal dari nama puncak Gunung Semeru yang merupakan gunung tertinggi di Jawa dan diagungkan juga dipercaya sebagai tempat bersemayamnya para dewa dan memiliki legenda mengenai air kehidupan. Tari Mahameru sebagai gambaran pengagungan, penggambaran para putri yang setia pada budayanya. Salah satunya dengan melestarikan ritual mengambil air di Semeru sebagai sarana tolak balak atau memohon keselamatan agar hajatnya terhindar dari petaka atau mara bahaya. Serta properti berbentuk rucut yang menjulang ke atas merupakan gambaran dari harapan kehidupan. Mari kita sambut, ini dia Tari Mahameru.
Ngala
Excuse me to Dr. Rakib Chaudhry. We would like to ask you to take a picture with the dancer.
Sekali lagi berikan aplaus yang meriah atas persembahan tari Mahameru.
Selanjutnya, sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis yang akan diwakili oleh Ibu Dr. Kristiningsi, SAMC, selaku Wakil Dekan Bidang Akademik. Kepada Ibu Kristiningsi, disilahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang terhormat Wakil Dekan Bidang Kerjasama, yang terhormat Wakil Dekan Bidang Kemahasiswaan, Pak Dr. Rakib Chaudhry sebagai pembicara, Bapak Ibu Kaprodi Sekprodi, Bapak Ibu dosen, para guru dari SMK 1 Gresik, para mahasiswa sekalian dan juga anak-anak dari SMK 1 Gresik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and I hope God always bless to you, all of you. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to our prestigious event in this room, Bangsal Pancasila, and also audience in the join the Zoom meeting. The international guest lecture today, we have the honor to hosting distinguished guests and speakers from Monash University, Australia, Dr. Rakib Chaudhry, BA, MA, MID, PhD. Welcome, sir. This event serves as an excellent platform for intellectual exchange, where we can explore innovative ideas, gain insight from experts, and broaden our perspective. The international guest lecture is a testament to our commitment to fostering international collaboration and promoting academic excellence. We are delighted to have such a diverse and esteemed group of attendees, including renowned scholars, researchers, students, and professionals from different fields. This gathering not only promotes cross-cultural understanding, but also creates opportunity for networking and forging meaningful connection between Economic and Business Faculty, Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya, with Monash University in Australia. Today, we have an exciting guest speaker, Dr. Rakib Chaudhry, who will share his knowledge and expertise on a wide range of topics, situating the role of English in global communication, competition, culture, and language identity. His presentation will cover emerging trends, groundbreaking research, and a significant development in his respective fields in business English communication. We encourage active participation from all attendees. Maybe as your engagement and thoughtful question will enrich the discussion and create a vibrant atmosphere of learning, intellectual, cultural. We would like to express our gratitude to the organizing committee for the invaluable support in making this event is possible. Lastly, we hope yeah. Lastly, we hope that today's international guest lecture will not only provide you with a valuable insight, but also inspire you to embrace new ideas and approach in your academic and professional endeavors. Thank you once again for joining us today. We wish you all a productive and memorable experience at this international guest lecture. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih atas sambutannya. Memasuki acara inti yakni pemaparan materi Situating the Role of English in Global Business Communication yang akan disampaikan langsung oleh Dr. Rakib Chowdhury BA, MA, MED, PhD yang akan dimoderatori oleh Bapak Haris Marpurdianto SSM Hum. Kepada Bapak Haris disilakan. Baik, berikut ini adalah CV daripada moderator kita pada pagi hari ini.
Mr. Haris Marpurdianto, Career Summary. An innovative and knowledgeable professional, having 5 years of experience as a lecturer, proficient in developing new lessons and activities to expand learning opportunities, extensive participation on committees and extracurricular activities, excellent knowledge of the subject and also great practical knowledge, and his work experience as English teacher at English Zone courses in 2017 until 2021. And the second, as Business English lecturer at Wijaya Kusuma University in 2021 until present. And his education, Bachelor of English Literature in the Faculty of Art in State Islamic University of Sunan Ampel, Surabaya in 2015 until 2019. And Master Degree of Linguistics in the Faculty of Humanities at Airlangga University in 2019 until 2021. And his journal articles by Mr. Haris Marpurdianto. First, positive and negative politeness strategies used in the exclusive interview between David Muir and Donald Trump on ABC News and in Charlie Rose Show. And the second, complaint strategies found on Instagram account at IndiHome from Indonesia and at T-Mobile from USA. Cross-cultural pragmatism. And the third, nationalism ideology, critical discourse analysis of Joko Widodo's speech in the meeting of the Association of Indonesia Village Government.
Selanjutnya acara saya serahkan kepada moderator. Disilakan Pak Haris.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable, the Vice Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Ibu Dr. Christine Ningsih, Ibu Siti Asia Murni, and also Bapak James Tumewu. Thanks for attending to this seminar. And also the head of the Department of Faculty of Economics and Business, from Management, Accountant, and also from Economics Development. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Actually, this is my first time to become a moderator, and I'm actually, honestly, I'm a little bit nervous about it, but it's okay. So we don't have to very formal in this seminar. We don't we have to be like semi-formal. If okay, if you want to ask questions, but after the explanation from Dr. Rakib. So okay, Our speaker today is Dr. Rakib Kauduri, B.A.M.A.M.E.D. PhD. And before that, I'd like to read the curriculum vitae or CV from Dr. Rakib Kauduri. For the screen, please. To read the CV from Dr. Rakib. CV-nya. Okay, as you can see on the screen on your left and also the right screen, actually for the academic qualification, he has finished for. Just scroll down, please. Okay, he has finished for academic qualifications. For the bachelor degree, he completed from University of Dhaka and he took Bachelor of Art English in the Department of English. And after that, in December 1995, he took the master. He completed the master from the Department of English in the University of Dhaka, and also he has a double degree for master degree. And also at Monash University, he completed in 2001 for master education. And for PhD degree or for Doctor of Philosophy, he has completed at Monash University from April 2004 until September 2008. And also for work experience from Dr. Rakib Kauduri, he has been teaching since 1996. Sorry if I'm mistaken. And also he has been teaching in many places, in many universities all around the world. And also, if you can see on the screen, for the work experience, he has become the senior lecturer at the Faculty of Education, Monash University, from 2009 until this present day. And also, he has visiting the Scholar and International Affiliate, ICE, International and Comparative Education, at University Brunei Darussalam. And also, the last is from Ho Chi Minh City Open University in Vietnam since October 2014 until now. Okay, so without any further, I'd like to invite the speaker, Mr. Dr. Rakib Kauduri. Please, would you like to join me and give a round of applause to them? Okay, wait a minute. He wants to bring a laptop, so that is the explanation that will be discussed for today. And also, welcome to the students from Muhammadiyah Senior High School, Gresik. Thanks for joining our event, our seminar event. And also Sehari Jadi Mahasiswa. And perhaps I want to point out maybe the students from your school to ask questions after the explanation from Dr. Rakib. Is it okay? Jadi nanti setelah penjelasan dari Dr. Rakib, saya mohon izin kepada Bapak Ibu guru yang ada di sini. Saya mohon izin untuk menunjuk salah satu siswa-siswi dari SMA Muhammadiyah 1 Gresik untuk bertanya, gitu ya. Dan barang siapa yang bertanya nanti akan mendapatkan hadiah. Okay, wait a minute. Oh yeah, for your information, actually he has become a lecturer in many places in the world. For example, in Bangladesh, Australia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brunei, and also Saudi Arabia. So without getting any further, please, I'd like to. Is it okay? You can use this microphone, please. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Rakib Kauduri. Piye kabare? Piye kabare?
Api wae.
Jadi kita tadi sudah berdiskusi ya. Misalnya kalau saya bilang, piye kabare, beliau menjawab api wae. Oke, okay. So we have to waiting for Mr. Rakib Koduri for prepare the setup for the PowerPoint slide. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, without any further ado, I'd like. Okay, it's okay. So without any further ado, I'd like to I'd like to present Dr. Rakib to deliver the material, and also please welcome and give round of applause for Dr. Rakib Koduri. Time is yours.
Thank you very much. My apologies. You'll have to give me 1 minute because I'm having some technical problems. I thought it would be set up. Just give me 1 more minute.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Oke, jadi mohon ditunggu 1 menit ya. Ini masih di setup. Mungkin ada error. Oke, Pak. Oke. No, it's okay. Yes, I actually brought it. And then you send it on WhatsApp. My WhatsApp. Yeah, that's okay. Laptop. Nggak bisa. Ini kita butuh laptop. Wait a minute, okay. Mohon maaf, ini karena masih di setup. Sebetulnya kemarin itu ya sudah kita persiapkan, cuman tiba-tiba ada error. Sudah. Sudah. Yes, start. Okay. Can I continue?
This is the remote.
Okay.
This is
Okay, without any further ado, I'd like to invite and also please welcome Dr. Rakib Koduri to deliver the material. Please welcome and give a round of applause for Dr. Rakib Koduri. Time is yours.
Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu, apa kabar? Senang sekali bisa berada di kota Surabaya yang indah ini bersama Bapak Ibu para pendidik. The rest of the presentation will be in English because I don't speak Bahasa. That's all I know about Bahasa. I just want to say two things before I get started. First of all, I'm sorry for the delay because of the technical problem here. And secondly, I've been to Indonesia many times. I've been to many cities across Indonesia, many universities. But this is the most beautiful campus I've ever seen. And this whole room is the most beautiful hall room I'm presenting in, not just in Indonesia, but all over the world. I feel like I'm in the middle of a museum right now. Feels like a museum. So as students of Wijaya Kusuma University, Surabaya, you should all be very proud to be studying at such a beautiful campus. And I also know that the foundation or the founding philosophy of the university is based on the Majapahit philosophy, for which the university has recently got an accreditation. So congratulations to all of you on achieving that recognition. Thank you very much. So we will get started. The topic that I have today is situating the role of English, the English language, in global business communication. Are you all from the Faculty of Business and Economics? Business and Economics. And how many of you here are graduating soon? Like in your final year. How many of you are in your final year? Please raise your hand. Some of you are in your final year. Maybe you're graduating at the end of this year. Is there anyone who has just started studies this year? Like new first year students? Do you understand what I'm asking? Okay, don't feel shy. I am a very informal person, and during my presentation, I will sometimes ask you some questions, right? You can also ask me questions. So I will speak in a very friendly way, in a very informal way, and I would like you to ask me questions as well. Anyway, so there are three things I will focus on in terms of English as a business, in terms of English in global business communication. Three things. One is competition, one is culture, and one is language identity. So let's get started. So I would like to start my presentation by asking you two questions, and please answer the questions. So here is the first one. How do you feel about your Indonesian accent when speaking English with foreigners? How do you feel? Tell me. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel ashamed of your accent? Yes? Do you feel embarrassed? Yes. How else do you feel when you speak to someone whose first language is English? Do you feel shy? Do you feel shy because of your Indonesian accent? Okay. Why do you feel shy? Why? Because it's not the right English accent. Is that why? All right. So here is the second question I want to ask you. What is your preferred English? British or American? Okay, I want you to raise your hand if you like American English accent. Raise your hand. American. How many of you? Come on, raise your hand. Okay. What about British? Raise your hand. British accent, some of you. Come on, most of you didn't raise your hands. Why? I'm going to ask you questions. You need to answer these questions. All right? So let's try once again. How many of you prefer the American accent? Raise your hand. American accent? A few more hands. British? British accent. A few more. All right, okay. So let's take a look at how English is used in Indonesia. Let's take a look, all right? It'll probably crack you up. Let's take a look at some examples. You've probably seen them around in Indonesia. This is how English is used. Okay, so you can see what's funny here. Seafood is the spelling, right? It's supposed to be seafood, not seafood. What about this? I don't think you will enjoy sleeping in or on this bed sheet. Instead of full time, you can go part time. Okay, there is more. Entry, please. It's a literal translation. How about this one here? So ice cream might be a criminal offense because it's S crime. All right. All right, so if you need a free wife for the men out here, you can go to Indomaret for a free wife. All right. This is a sex dress. How about this one? This is a salon. So Faisal. Faisal is what? Facial, right? Facial. Cream bad. What is cream bad? No, can someone tell me what is cream bad? Cream bath, right? Cream bath. Okay. So I'll show you a few more. So, does anyone like bread chicken? Anyone? All right. What about tahu bakar, no burn? Literal translation, because grill means with fire, so it's burn. So even tourists, English-speaking tourists, everyone is most welcome. Because don't worry, we speak English. We speak English. Welcome, tourist. Even if you want to do translation, you can't trust people because they can't spell. Or if you want to have a private lesson in English, it's a problem. So these signboards will make you say RIP, rest in peace English. It is the death of English. English is being destroyed, right? So this person here has written an article about these spelling mistakes, very, very funny spelling mistakes, and saying English will die. English is dying. And she's calling them English fails. And she said that the reader could stop laughing your hearts out, okay? But here is the thing. No, it's not funny. It's not funny. I mean, yes, it is funny because we all laughed. There is nothing wrong if you laugh. It's okay. It is actually funny. But English will actually not die in that way. This is how English will survive. As the language of global business communication, English will not die. It will survive. So let me explain why, in a way, these signs are not funny. And there is nothing wrong with these signs. Cream bud, free wife, bed sheet, facial. There's nothing wrong with that. Because the objective of language is to communicate meaning, right? And although there is a spelling mistake, we know exactly what it means, right? So when it says free wife, we know it means free Wi-Fi. When it says bed sheet, we know it means bed sheet. Okay? So it is doing the job that is required to do. So let's not laugh at those people who haven't had the opportunity like us to have studied in a school and high school and university and learn English, correct spelling, pronunciation. It was written, those signboards were written by someone with limited literacy, someone who hasn't received the education that we have received. And how did they get those spellings wrong? Because they were listening with their ears, right? So bed sheet sounds like bed, S-H-I-T, because that's how they are hearing it. So they are not literate, they are not educated like us. A lot of them can't afford education. They are unfortunate, and they didn't have the privilege that we have had as educated people. So let's not laugh at them. English will not die. That is how we use English. And as long as it can perform the job, which is to communicate the meaning, it is okay. There is nothing wrong with that. So if you look at these signs, you can laugh. It can amuse you. You can be amused. But just remember this, that this is not the death of English. So I don't agree with that author. So here are two questions when it comes to English in global business communication, the role of English, okay? Here is the first question. Is it necessary to have native speaker-like competence in terms of lexis, which means vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, for effective communication in English? Is it necessary to sound like an American or a British speaker in global business communication? What do you think? Is it necessary? Do you need to sound like an American? No. There is nothing wrong if you sound Indonesian. There's nothing wrong if you have an Indonesian accent when you speak to a foreigner. So what was my first question? Do you remember the first question? How do you feel about your Indonesian accent when you speak to a foreigner? And you said you feel uncomfortable, you feel shy, you feel embarrassed, you feel insulted, you feel uncomfortable. You shouldn't feel any of these things, because your Indonesian accent is your identity. You are not supposed to sound like an American, because you are not an American, you are an Indonesian. You are not supposed to have a British accent, because you are not British. You are not supposed to have British accent. You are supposed to have Indonesian accent. And as long as people understand you in your Indonesian accent, there is no problem, there is no shame, there is no embarrassment. It's okay. So here is the second question. Is it intelligibility that comes into play while considering effective communication? So today's topic is English in global business communication. When it comes to communicating with people in English outside Indonesia, is intelligibility more important? The answer is yes. Intelligibility is more important than pronunciation, than accent. As long as someone can understand you, even a native speaker of English, a foreigner, even if you're using Indonesian pronunciation accent, it's not a problem. So just remember that. All those funny examples, there is nothing wrong with that. Okay? So let's move on. English in global business communication is a topic, a very significant topic, a topic we can't avoid, because of globalization that started in the 90s. So some of you were not born. I think most of you were not born in the 90s. I was in my university in the 90s. That's when globalization started. Before that, we didn't have globalization. So the phenomena of globalization is relatively new. It's only about 35 years, just 35, maybe 30 years old. Before that, there was no globalization. And trade liberalization, which is a result of globalization. So the hundreds of countries in the world had to increase their communication with other countries. And the primary means of communication is language, and they had to choose one language, and English was already a dominant language because of the colonization in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. English was already spread all over the world. So English became a default choice, the number one choice in the 90s with the advent of globalization. So what happens is we have certain paradigms or orientations to understanding international communication, not English, just international communication. So the first one is EIL, English as an international language, which includes Indonesian English. English as a global language, EGL. And we also have ELF, English as a lingua franca. They are understood differently. On the other hand, what about business English communication? So, English has been seen as the international language of business, a global language of business, the most recognized business lingua franca, and also something called BELF or EBLF, which stands for Business English as Lingua Franca. So it is not English as lingua franca, it is business English as lingua franca. So it is almost like business English is a language of its own. So English is a language, business English is a distinct language as well. And that includes BELF or business English as lingua franca. And some authors have researched on this, including myself. So the last reference you can see there, Rashid and Chaudhary, that is my research on BELF. So I would like to talk a little bit about my own research on the topic of English in global business communication. So here are 3 articles that I have published in the last few years on this topic. And as you can see, they are based on a similar context, which is the context of the ready-made garments industry in Bangladesh. Now, most of you might have been thinking that I am from Australia, but originally from a different country. Which country do you think I'm from? When I am in Australia, when I am in Indonesia, most people think I am from India, right? Why? Because of my nose? Because of my skin color? Eyes, yeah, eyes, okay. Is that what you think for my eyes? Well, I don't look like Shah Rukh Khan, so I'm definitely not from India. Shah Rukh Khan is much better looking than me. Okay, so I'm from Bangladesh, which was once a part of India. It was a part of India, now it's separate. But I've been living in Australia for 23 years. I'm an Australian citizen. Australia is my country. My children were born in Australia. They are second-generation Australian migrants. And Australia is an immigrant nation. As you know, most of the people in Australia have been from Europe or Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, and they have made up Australia. So Australia is a multicultural and immigrant country, so I'm from there. So if you look at the titles of my publications on the topic of business English, you will see that they are all based in Bangladesh. The first one is on power dynamics, the second one is discourse analysis, and the third one is on English proficiency and employment, based in Australia, but the participants are from Bangladesh. So why is Bangladesh an important country in terms of English as a global business language? It's because statistically, Bangladesh is the second highest provider of ready-made garments, ready-made clothes all around the world after China because of cheap labor. So if you look at some of the statistics, it is a very small country with a very high population, 164.7 million. And Indonesia's population is, I think it's 270, is that so? More than
300 billion.
300 million, thank you, yeah. So, small country, huge population. So labor is quite cheap. And in the 70s, we started the RMG, ready-made garments industry. Right now, there are more than 5,000 companies making ready-made garments, providing employment to 3.6 million people. And if you go to Australia and you want to buy a shirt or a t-shirt, and you look at the tag here at the back, in most cases it would say made in Bangladesh. So it's really big because, you know, a lot of big brands, expensive brands, clothes that are bought in all over the world, they're actually made in Bangladesh. So my research was based on this particular sector, but because my background is language education, what I did was I researched on how English is being used as a means of global business communication. And that's where we came up with the term BELF, or Business English as Lingua Franca. Business English as Lingua Franca is different from general English. It's different from the English that you use for academic purposes. It's different from the language that you need in order to write a critical essay, your assignments. It is very different. It is different in three ways. It is simplified, which means it is not too difficult in terms of grammar, syntax, jargon, colloquialisms, etc. It is hybridized, which means it is mixed. And when I say mixed, it means combination of two languages. So it's a kind of Creole. And it is highly dynamic. Dynamic means it keeps on changing, okay? So business English as lingua franca is different from English as lingua franca. Two different things here. And there are three factors that determine what kind of BELF is used between two people when they communicate in the context of business. One is the nature of the business, whether it is ready-made garments, whether it is chemical supplies, whether it is fruit and vegetables, whether it's cattle, depends on the industry, the shared professional area of expertise, and of course, how long they've known each other, the length of business relationship. So, in the 80s, communicative competence was a hot topic, and a lot of researchers started talking about communicative competence as being more important than grammatical competence. And Canale identified these four competencies: grammatical, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategies. Later on, using the same competences, the notion of BELF communicative competences came up. And as you can see, a lot of researchers researched on BELF, Business English as Lingua Franca competencies. So you can see that there are four features of BELF competence. And the first one is what I've already mentioned. Business English is simple English. Business English is English that where you don't have to follow grammatical rules. Or rather, if you make grammatical mistakes, it will not necessarily compromise the business relationship. Such as the examples that I showed you. We welcome tourists. We speak English, bed sheet, facial, all of those examples. So simplified English, there might be grammatical errors, spelling errors, but that's not a problem. It has genre conventions. So genre means the type of text. So writing a letter, writing an invoice, an approval, a proposal, a tender application, these are the genres. So if you look at the third point, in business English, grammatical correctness is considered secondary, not primary. It is less important than specialized vocabulary. So if someone is working in the ready-made garments industry, they will know certain words that other people might not know. The jargon, the terminology, they will understand a lot of these things. And third and fourthly, it is highly context dependent. So context means whether it's an email, telephone call, if it is on Zoom, if it is face-to-face, if the conversation is between high-ranking officials or secretarial people working in the office, it will also depend on that. So here is a quote from the post-colonial theorist and writer Frantz Fanon. He is saying, to speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. Now, there are three things in the subtitle of my presentation, and one of them is language identity. So now I want to talk about that language identity and the cultural identity that we have, and how our linguistic and cultural identity can affect how we should use English as a language for global communication. So this quote simply says that there is a connection between how you look at the world and your culture and your own language, the language that you speak, and we should respect our languages. So let's take a look at a new term called heteroglossia. The person that you can see on the slide is Mikhail Bakhtin. He was a very well-known Russian linguist and philosopher. He came out with the term heteroglossia, competing voices. So gloss or glossia actually means tongue. Tongue. How do you say tongue in Bahasa? How do you say tongue? What's the tongue? Can you say it louder? Why is everyone so shy? Why is everyone so quiet? I need a bit more interaction from you guys. Come on. Why is everyone so quiet? Hey, are you listening to me at the back or you're on your phones? What's happening at the back? Look at me, everyone. Hello, I'm here. Come on. I'll ask you questions. You have to say something. I want this to be very informal and friendly and interactive, okay? So please pay your attention, take some notes, ask me questions, right? Share with me. Let's do it in a conversation, not just me talking to you. Anyway, so heteroglossia means there are more than one language which we use together. And languages are not separate. So if you speak 2 or 3 languages, they are all working together. So there are 2 ways in which we can look at the linguistic profile of a person. The first one is called the monoglossic view. The monoglossic view means if a person speaks 2 languages, like Javanese and Bahasa, and even English as a third language, then there are 2 or 3 different parts in your head, one for each language. And so L1, first language, plus L2, second language, results in L1 and L2. So a bilingual person, according to the monoglossic view, is 2 monolinguals in one person. That's the monolingual view. Bakhtin said that the monolingual view is actually not correct. That is not how language is used. So he came up with this second view, which is the heteroglossic view. According to the heteroglossic view, languages cannot be separated. They are all together in your head. So it is not L1 plus L2. It is L1, L2. And that is why when we use one language, we tend to translanguage or code switch or mix or hybridize more than one language together. We just put them all together. So that is called the heteroglossic view. So here is a quote I would like you to see. Bilingual education programs developed in the 20th century responded to what we called a monoglossic belief, which assumes that legitimate linguistic practices are only those enacted by monolinguals, which means even a few years ago, and even now in some countries, people believe that if you want to teach a foreign language to students, you should not use the first language of students. You should only use the foreign language. So that is the monoglossic, monolingual instruction. Okay? But what that does, it separates the first language from the second language, whereas heteroglossia says these two languages are inseparable. You can't really separate them. More contemporary research shows that the heteroglossic approach to language education is better. In other words, we should be allowed to use our first language when we are speaking English or a different language. So let's look at Indonesia. Can you recognize this city in the slide? Which city in Indonesia do you think this is? Which city does it look like? Does it look familiar? Does it look familiar? What do you think? Come on. Why is everyone so quiet? Why is everyone so quiet? Okay, this is Surabaya. If you look at the map of Indonesia in terms of 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, how many ways can you say 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3. What about in Jawa? What about in Bali? Sa, dua, telu. How do you say it in Surabaya, in Java? 1, 2, and 3. Is it 1, 2, 3 or?
No. Actually, there's a differences. In
Yeah.
Java, we also actually say siji, loro, telu.
Telu. Siti koro telu.
Siji. Wichi.
CG, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Betawi is 1, 2, 3. Right? It's different. If you go to Sumatra, Minangkabau, Oek, Duo, Tigo. And Minahasa is Esa, Rua, Telu. So it's so different everywhere else. So why am I talking about this? Because Indonesia has more than 700 languages. More than 700 languages. And Bahasa Indonesia, which originates from Malay, itself is the lingua franca. Because if there was no Bahasa Indonesia, then everyone would be speaking in their own regional languages, which is their first language. So there are very few people in Indonesia whose first language is Bahasa Indonesia. I think there is no one here whose first language is Bahasa Indonesia. It's your second language. Your first language is probably Javanese or Minangkabau or Minahasa or Sasak or Sundanese or any of these other regional languages. That is your first language, not Bahasa, probably. In most cases, that is the case. So we needed a language within the country in order to unify everyone for common communication. That's where the idea of lingua franca comes from. It's a common language. Now, of course, we can't use Bahasa Indonesia to communicate with the rest of the world. And that's where English comes in. Why is it English? Why is it not French, Dutch, Putonghua or Chinese, Nihongo, Japanese, Espanol, Spanish? Why not this? Why English? Because of the colonial expansion of English-speaking countries in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, of course. Now, 3-4 years ago, There was an article written by Karim Raslan, and the title of that article was "Why Javanese Failed to Become Indonesia's National Language." Because ethnically speaking, Javanese is 45% of the population. It's almost half. It's almost half of the population. So Karim Raslan was trying to explain why Javanese didn't become the national language. But this is actually the wrong question. I don't think it would have been good for Javanese or Sundanese or Minangkabau or any other language, any other local language, to become the national language of Indonesia. Because in that case, how would the others feel? It would be a linguistic domination of one language, the superiority of one language over other languages within Indonesia, which is exactly what English is doing all around the world. So the British people have left the former colonies, but the former colonies are still being linguistically colonized through English education. We know that. So this is actually the wrong question. Javanese, it didn't fail, but it was positioned in a way that it is just one other regional language, just like any other language, without any specific privilege accorded to the Javanese language, the number one most spoken language in the world, in Indonesia. And the interesting thing is, if you look at this, in terms of daily language use, less than 1/5, so that's 19.94, less than 1/5 of the population in Indonesia use Bahasa Indonesia in their daily lives for communication. Because when you speak to your friends on campus, at school, in the classroom, you're using Bahasa, but at home, with your relatives, you're probably using Javanese, not Bahasa. And of course, there are similarities, but there are also differences. So, because most of you are probably a bit bored, and you're feeling a bit sleepy, and you are not talking much, and you are not paying much attention, I will try to tell a few stories, hopefully to make you feel a bit more interested. So let me talk about myself and some of my experiences with linguistic identity. Remember, linguistic identity is one of the things that I'll focus on in my topic. So this is what I do. I travel a lot. My hobby is traveling. At Monash University, we have a very busy workload. We have to teach, we have to supervise PhD students, we have to write and conduct research, we have to attend conferences, so there is always a lot of things to do. Keeps us very busy. So for me, the best way to relax is to travel. So I travel a lot. And I come to Indonesia every year because Indonesia is my most favorite country to travel. And when I travel, one of the things that I do is I explore languages and cultures and how people use languages and all of that. So in the next 3 slides, I will show you 3 videos so that everyone wakes up about my travels and how I try to explore the linguistic identity of people in the context of English as a global business language, or English used for global business communication. So last year in October, I was in Vietnam. In North Vietnam, about 3 hours away from the capital city, Hanoi, is a place called Sapa. And in Sapa, there is an ethnic minority called the Hmong. They live in that city. And Vietnamese is not their first language because they are not the majority Vietnamese people. They are a different ethnicity. Their first language is a different language from Vietnamese. The lady that you're saying here sells a kind of flute to tourists. And she has never gone to school. She can't read and write. She has never gone to school. But she can speak English. Let's
local music.
say again.
This one is local music. You see,
Okay.
I play. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And say hi to my daughters,
Okay. So, hi,
Sammy and Nish.
Sandy and Nis.
Hello from Sapa.
Hello from Sabah. I am.
All right. So let's look at the next one. This is another lady that I met in a village in North Vietnam last year. She's very old and she's never been to school. She's illiterate. She can't read and write, but she can speak English. Let's listen to her. You speak good English. How did you learn English?
No, not lot.
Yeah, but really good English. Learn good English.
Me live go this way. Me live go
Oh,
this way.
your house is over there.
How much then?
Oh.
Yeah.
How many children?
Me have five children. I had 10 one children. Lot one children.
Big family.
Yeah, thank you.
And 3 grandchildren.
Yeah. And you how old?
51.
51.
Yeah.
Oh,
What
young,
about you?
Young.
How old are you?
Me 66.
66.
Yeah.
You're
me
very
old.
young. Yo.
Oh, not young. Me
You're
old.
young. You're young and
And you
beautiful.
just tell me, baby, me son.
So how old is your son? Biggest son?
42.
42.
Yeah.
Yeah. Younger than me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And one 40, one
Yeah.
20,
20.
28.
And grandchildren, how old?
Grandchildren.
Right, so I'll just pause it here. It's a longer video. You can watch it on YouTube. But here we can see an old lady who has never been to school, whose first language is a minority language in Vietnam, not even Vietnamese language, Tiếng Việt. It's a different language. She is speaking to a tourist from Australia in English. And she's making some grammatical mistakes. And sometimes she kind of misunderstands me. But I understand absolutely everything she's telling me. Intelligibility, remember? So think about those signs, you know, bread chicken, facial, cream bath, bed sheet, free wife. We understand what it means. English for global business communication. So I'll show you one more video, just one more. So I met someone called Mai Lai from a small village in North Vietnam, Ta Phin. And she's wearing her traditional Hmong costume. And what I did was, I asked my colleague Melissa from Monash University to do a video recording of an interview. So I interviewed Mai Lai for about 10 to 12 minutes in English, just in English, completely in English. And I asked her some questions, and she answered them, and she understood everything I asked her. And I understood everything she replied. So let's listen to her, and then I'll get back to the topic of linguistic identity in English global business communication. So this is Mai Lai, and that is me interviewing her in English. All right, hello everyone. Here I am in the village of Ta Phin, close to Sapa, in the north of Vietnam, about 5 hours away from the capital city, Hanoi. And I'm enjoying my cafe soda, which is the sweet coffee with ice and condensed milk. Beautiful, really good quality coffee. And I'm here with, can you tell me your name please?
My name is Mai Lai.
Mai Lai.
Yes.
And what's your tribe, ethnic
My
community
choice
from?
mine is Wenzhou.
Wijaya.
Yeah, Wenzhou people.
Now I can see that you speak really good English. Did you learn English at school?
No, I learned from tourists. I learned from tourists. Money tourists. Maybe 4 years ago, see money tourists come here. I to go to selling some stuff. I make a tour guide. I took some model. I learned from tourists.
And how old are you, can I ask?
I speak English.
Yeah,
I did 28.
28.
Yeah.
You are 28 years old?
Yeah, but I learned from tourists.
Yeah.
Yes.
And have you ever been to school?
Before I didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Everything I learned from tourists.
All from tourists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I speak Vietnamese also. I learned from tourists. I don't go to school.
Just
Before,
tourists.
yeah. Before I small one, the school so far from my parents. My parents don't give much to go to school.
And how many? Tell me about your family.
My family, my mother had 9 children. I had 5 sisters older me and 3 brothers older me. And a young one.
Okay. Do you have any children?
I had 2.
How old are they?
My son 20,
Yes.
my daughter 18.
18 and 20.
Yeah.
You look very young to have 20-year-old and 18-year-old
I
children.
thank you so much.
So tell me about the tourists.
All right, so we'll just stop it here. We'll just pause here. It's a longer video, but we don't need to see all of it. So this is very interesting because I'm in Vietnam and I'm talking to a Vietnamese lady from an ethnic minority, and English is not even her first or second language. And she has never been to school. She is uneducated. She is illiterate. And yet I've talked to her for more than 10 minutes just in English. And of course, she's making some grammatical mistakes. She's making some mistakes with her pronunciation, but I have absolutely no problem in understanding what she's telling me. So this is called intelligibility. Intelligibility means to understand what someone is saying. So in English, in the context of global business communication, you don't need to sound like a native speaker. You don't need to feel ashamed if you have an Indonesian accent. And you should actually feel ashamed if you have a British accent. You should actually feel ashamed if you have an American accent, because you are trying to be an American. No, you're not an American. You're an Indonesian. That is your identity. You should feel ashamed if you are trying to sound like a native English speaker. So try to remember the first 2 questions I asked you at the beginning of the presentation. How do you feel when you use Indonesian accent while speaking in English with a foreigner? You feel ashamed, uncomfortable, you feel embarrassed? You shouldn't feel embarrassed. You should feel proud to be an Indonesian and to have an Indonesian accent. As long as your counterpart, the person you're spoken to, can understand what you're saying, intelligibility, it is absolutely fine. So just think about how people can acquire languages and make mistakes and still be able to communicate. So here is the question: where do you think My Lai learned English from? How did she learn English? The lady, the old lady in the previous video actually said that she learned it from tourists, right? So she sells stuff to tourists, and over a number of years, by listening to English, she has actually learned it good enough to be able to communicate and talk to people for 10 minutes, 15 minutes at a stretch. Answer questions about her family, herself, her own, learning of English and all of these things. So that's very interesting how we can do it. And remember, she is actually using English for business because she is actually selling souvenirs to English-speaking tourists using English. It is exactly the same thing we do in big companies in Indonesia when we communicate with people from other countries, not just English-speaking countries. It could be with China. So if an Indonesian business has some kind of business arrangement with a Chinese counterpart, a company in China, they are not going to use Bahasa, or they are not going to use Putonghua or Mandarin or Chinese. They're going to use English, which is exactly what she's doing here. So whether you're in a big company, in a high-rise building, or in a small village in Vietnam, English is used in the same way. And the principle of that kind of use of English is the same, which is intelligibility, not native-like pronunciation, not perfect grammar. You can have, errors, but you can still communicate. So when you see a sign like this, "Welcome tourist, we speak English," you may laugh at it, but there's nothing wrong with it because you understand exactly what it means and you feel welcomed. So when I see signs like this, I don't laugh. I say, "Oh, okay, it's okay." They have appropriated English. They have owned English, and now they are using English to their own advantages, because this sign, although it is written in wrong spelling, right, it will make sense to anyone who speaks English from outside Indonesia, even if they are not native speakers of English. It does its job. So when it comes to I know you're students from the Faculty of Business and Economics. So when it comes to teaching business English, what are the implications? I'll try to finish. This is the last part of my presentation. We have to remember that education has a political agenda, and education is also a public issue. It's not just about getting a certificate. We have to understand what kind of education to provide. And who decides on education? Is it the ministry, or is it bigger organizations like UNESCO and UNICEF? So we'll look at that as well. So here's a quote from Kropotkin. Is a Russian philosopher, another Russian philosopher, just like Mikhail Bakhtin. And this is what he says: "Competition is the law of the jungle, but cooperation is the law of civilization." So he's basically saying there are two orientations: competition, cooperation. And he's saying in civilization, for civilized people, we need to cooperate. We don't need to compete with each other. However, in business, of course, you have to compete. So there are two broad orientations to business and international relationships. Two kind of orientations. One is competition, one is cooperation. So if you look at the last 40, 50 years, or actually even more after the Second World War, we've had the United Nations, and within that UNESCO, look at education from a humanistic perspective, equity, social justice perspective. So that was based on cooperation. And then you have OECD and the World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Fund. They were looking at education on the basis of competition. So we have two different orientations. Usually developing countries like Indonesia, like Bangladesh, like other countries that are still developing, but not the top economies of the world, sometimes they get funding for projects from the United Nations and others. And what they want to do is they want to push their agenda of prioritizing certain things in education because of that power of donating money. So once again, this is just a summary. UNESCO and United Nations has the cooperation orientation. On the other hand, the OECD has an orientation of competition. And we need to reconcile both of these two things. I think I'll just skip this part, but this is a theoretical model where there are 6 different stages of cultural identity development according to Banks. The one at the beginning is denial, where you want to deny other cultures. And stage 6 is what we need, which is globalism and global competency, the internalization of universalistic ethical values and principles of humankind. And this is just an image of those 6 stages. Now, you may have heard of multicultural, cross-cultural, intercultural. And we say that multiculturalism is what we need, things like that. But multiculturalism is actually an old concept. It is no longer seen as a contemporary way of looking at cultures. So if you look at the images, multiculturalism simply means recognition of multiple cultures. It's just like, Indonesia is multicultural. Okay, we have 700 ethnicities. It's just a recognition. There is no dialogue. When you talk about cross-cultural, we are talking about 2 cultures interacting with each other. It is still limited. When we talk about intercultural, it becomes richer. It's about dialogue between all cultures. It's not unidirectional, it is multidirectional. Okay? So multicultural is the simplest way of looking at diversity. Cross-cultural is just looking at 2 cultures. Intercultural is richer than that. So in global business communication, we need to look at cultures from the intercultural point of view, not from the cross or multicultural point of view. And this is just an image showing how they historically developed over the last 40 years. Okay, so this one I've already explained. Multiculturalism is reductive. It is based on tolerance and tokenism. Tokenism means let's recognize that they are different because that's the right thing to do. It's just a tokenism. It's not really meaningful. And so we need to move from multiculturalism to interculturalism. The third framework is transculturalism, and it is based on the notion of superdiversity. So superdiversity means it is more diverse than diverse. So for example, Javanese, if you recognize Javanese culture as distinct from Sundanese culture, that is diversity, because you're saying we are different, right? But within Javanese culture, there are also variations. It is not the same. You cannot homogenize all Javanese and say all Javanese speak with the same accent, eat the same food. That's not the case, right? So superdiversity is looking deeper into that, and that is based on transculturalism. This is just another quote on what I just said. And 3 years ago, an Indonesian writer actually wrote a book called Language Policy in Super Diverse Indonesia. And it is based on the idea of super diversity of Indonesia. Not just 700 ethnicities, it's much more than that. So this is a really good book. So in terms of using English for global business communication, we need to move from multiculturalism to interculturalism into transculturalism. But there is also a 4th framework after transculturalism, and that is called cosmopolitanism. Cosmopolitanism is not just about seeing another culture, but looking at the entire world in terms of global citizenship. Cosmopolitanism is the belief that if there is a problem in China, I should worry about it as well, even though I'm very far away from China, because we live on the same planet. So global citizenship. So something like, it could be the topic of climate change, global warming, recycling of plastic, air pollution. These issues are for everyone. They are not localized. So we need to look beyond national boundaries. That is called cosmopolitanism. So I'll finish now. What are the teaching and the implications of global business communication in terms of teaching and learning English? Number 1, home language is important in all contexts. Home language. So if it is Javanese or if it is Bahasa, these languages should be used in learning and teaching English. for global communication. It should be recognized. Number two, recognition and acceptance of Indonesian accent, Indonesian English. You should not feel ashamed of having an Indonesian accent when you speak to a foreigner. You should be proud of it because that is your identity. And there is no reason why you should sound like an American speaker because you're not American. You're just trying to pretend to be an American. You're not. Number three, multilingual corrective feedback. When you help your students in the class, you can provide that feedback in your first language, not a problem. Need for dialogic feedback and scaffolding, helping. And finally, the value and celebration of linguistic diversity and super diversity at school. That brings me to the end of my presentation. That's my email address. You can add me on Instagram. That's my Instagram. And it was really nice to have this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Please give an applause for Dr. Rakib Chaudhry once more. Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Rakib Chaudhry for giving such an informative presentation for all of us. And for the next session is question and answer sessions. So I'd like to give the opportunity or the chance to each of you or each of the individual to ask questions. Jadi sesi selanjutnya yaitu sesi tanya jawab ya. Mungkin ada dari teman-teman yang dari SMA, SMK dan juga teman-teman mahasiswa yang ingin bertanya, silakan bertanya. And maybe if you do not know how to speak in English, perhaps I could help you to translate to Dr. Rakib Chaudhry. Okay? Is there any questions? Any questions at all? Ya, Mbak, mau tanya? Okay. For the microphone, please. Do not forget to mention your name and also your division.
Thank you for giving me the chance to ask you. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Marcel, currently studying accounting. So my question is, in what way would you recommend or are there any tips for us as a student studying in business communication to get better in speaking in English fluently? Because most of us actually understand what foreigner actually says in English, but we commonly have very low confidence to speak in English with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. I think that's a very practical question. So I would like to say two things. One is don't try to imitate foreigners. So if you have to speak to a foreigner, don't try to accommodate them at the cost of sacrificing your own linguistic identity. You are an Indonesian and you should be proud to be Indonesian. And it's not just your responsibility to make an effort to be understood by them. It is also their responsibility to try to understand you, right? So why do you need to have the same accent as your foreigner partner? So if they're from America, why do you have to sound American just to be on their same level? No. Let them come down to your level and understand you. So I think your question was, so what do I do about it, right? So I think what you can do is you can try to increase your intelligibility and see whether there are any systematic errors in your pronunciation that is preventing that person from understanding you. That's it. But don't try to have an accent of a foreigner. And that's what I'm saying. It is okay if you have an Indonesian accent. There is nothing wrong with that. And finally, of course, Marcel, the more you expose yourself to people speaking English and talk to them, right? The more you can improve your competence in speaking. So it's practice, there's no shortcut. Just like you can see the Vietnamese ladies there speaking, they never went to school. They just practiced with others, and that's how they learned English. So you can do that as well. Thank you.
Jadi, cuma if I try to translate to the audience. Jadi intinya perkataan dari Dr. Rakib Chaudhry, kalian itu tidak usah yang penting itu jangan soal aksennya dulu. Yang terpenting itu dari segi grammatical sama kelancaran kalian dalam berbahasa. ketika kalian berbicara dalam accent, tadi disebutkan ada 2 ya yang terkenal. Sebetulnya ada 3, Inggris Amerika, Australia, dan juga British. Yang kebanyakan dari kalian itu biasanya mencoba hanya untuk mengimitasi tanpa mengerti maksud dari kalimat tersebut, dari apa yang disampaikan. Jadi ketika kalian ngomong tentang bahasa Inggris, ngomong aja pakai pakai aksen Indonesia nggak apa-apa. I go to school every day by using bicycle, sebetulnya nggak apa-apa. Hal tersebut itu bukan masalah yang sangat sangat riskan seperti itu. Nah, itu mungkin kesimpulan dari Dr. Akib. Oke, thank you. Is there any other questions? Oke, Mas, please mention just. Oh ya, sorry, the curve. Ya Mbak, gantian dulu Mas.
Hello, Mr. Akib. My name is Linda. I'm from management. Okay, sorry. I saw your article about identity, equality, and social justice in Asia Pacific. It has made me so excited to continue studying abroad, especially at Monash University. Okay, maybe my question almost same like Marcel, but this is a basic question. There are so many of us, maybe we can speak English, but we don't use English every day, right? Of course, our language is very bad, especially if we are going to start a conversation. We must be afraid if we make a mistake of vocabulary. It's not about accent, right? Can you give me a suggestion so that we can have to correct to start a smooth conversation? Thank you.
Hilda, thank you. And first of all, I'm really glad to know you've read my book and you have known about me and you intend to come to Monash University. So I look forward to seeing you at Monash University in the near future. I really hope so. And once you get there, write to me and say, hi, do you remember me? I was at Wijaya Kusuma University, now I'm here in Melbourne. So I look forward to seeing you. By the way, there are many Indonesian students at Monash University, many. And so I welcome you to consider future studies at Monash if you want to come. Monash is a very highly ranked university, but it also offers a lot of scholarships. And of course, there are scholarships from the Indonesian government as well. So I look forward to seeing you. So Hilda, your question was about, making mistakes and, keep going and all of that. But, as I said, and as you understand, and I saw you were nodding, so you were probably the most attentive person in the entire audience today. So thank you for that. I think communicative competence for business, as I said in my slide, is almost entirely dependent on intelligibility. Unlike English education in the classroom. So in the classroom, in your exam, in your assignments, if you make grammatical mistakes, if you make spelling mistakes, you will be penalized. You will get a lower grade, right? Okay. But for business communication, the English that you use can be and should be simple and hybrid and dynamic, as I said. So you can use simple language in terms of vocabulary, grammar, sentence structure. You can even eliminate things like auxiliary verbs. So instead of saying, I am happy, you can just say, I happy. Now, I happy is grammatically incorrect. No one can accept that. But for business communication, if you say, I happy, that's fine, because it's about intelligibility. It's just about, just like, we welcome tourists, that example? Spelling mistakes, my lie, making a lot of grammatical mistakes, so what? It doesn't matter. It's really about understanding. So on one hand, I'm asking you, as far as pronunciation is concerned, don't try to be American or British or Australian. Try to be an Indonesian, a proud Indonesian speaker of English. You should be proud about that, not ashamed about that. On the other hand, just make sure that what you're saying is intelligible. They understand you. So I'm not saying that correct spelling is not important. I'm just saying for English in global business communication, it's actually not important as long as you understand each other. Just don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. All right? Thank you, Hilda. And see you at Monash.
Okay, maybe there is a questions from Zoom apps, from our audience, from our participant from Zoom apps. If there is a questions, just text it on the chat box and I'll read it loudly in the front of Dr. Rakib Chaudhry. Okay, is there any more questions? One more questions? Mas? Okay.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say welcome, Mr. Rakib, to our University of Wijaya Kusuma. Actually, I have the same question with Linda and the question, but I want to ask about the grammar that used in global business communication. Is it important to use? The correct grammar while we start communicating with other people? I mean, does it work when we use wrong grammar while we start communicating with other people? Why do I ask like that? Because the problem that becomes our struggle in English is not about the vocabulary and pronunciation. It's about the grammar. So is it important or not? Thank you.
What's your name, Mas? Just mention the name.
Fikri.
Oh, right, Fikri. So your focus is on grammar rather than pronunciation, right, Fikri? So
yes.
I think grammar, of course, is important, but remember that in business communication, it could be an email, or it could be a telephone, or it could be on Zoom, let's say, right? So the degree to which grammar is important is different for these different forms of communication. So for example, if you're writing an email, and if that email is for a tender competition, or if that email is for a business proposal, or if that email is concerning the signing of an agreement, business deal, right? Grammar is very important because these are all formal documentations. But if you are talking on the phone or on Zoom or having a meeting with someone you already know, in that case, grammar is not very important. And that's why one of the three factors in effective BELF, Business English as Lingua Franca, one of the four factors or three factors was the length of relationship between you and your partner. So if you have known each other for a long time, even if you make mistakes, they will still understand you. But if you are making a new business relationship with a new partner, then grammar is very important because you don't want to make too many mistakes so that they think, oh, this person doesn't know English, I don't want to do business with them, right? So it can be both. Thank you, Fikri.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do you get the point? Mas Fikri, do you get the point? So I don't need to translate that.
I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Maybe there is Vindi Itasari. Vindi Itasari. Is he here? Nggak ada ya? Okay. Is there any more questions? One more questions from David, from the MC, Master of Ceremony, from Risti or Dharma. Maybe from the teacher as well. If you want to ask questions, it's allowed, okay? From Zoom apps, is there any questions? Yeah, from senior high school. Yes. Okay. Mungkin ada teman-teman yang dari sekolahan, dari SMA Muhammadiyah dan juga dari mana lagi yang lain yang pakai baju hitam ini? Ya. Jadi Mr. Akib ini sangat senang ya karena kedatangan siswa-siswi SMA dari berbagai macam SMA yang ada di Jawa Timur ini. Oke. Mungkin ada yang bertanya? Kalau ada yang bertanya, mungkin tidak bisa dalam bahasa Inggris, saya akan membantu untuk mentranslatekan, untuk mengartikan kepada Dr. Akib. Ada yang tanya? Kalau nggak ada yang tanya, ada yang tanya? Mungkin gurunya juga, maybe the teacher if you wanna ask a question as well, it's permitted. Masnya? Nggak ada yang tanya? Okay, if there's no more questions, David, do you want to ask the questions? David is one of my students in my class. Do you want to ask the questions? Yes. Do you want to ask the questions? Okay, please give a mic to Mas David.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael, and I'd like to ask a question. What if someone happened to learn English as their first language, either with a British or American accent, while they're actually living in Indonesia? Is that somewhat disgraceful?
Thank you, Michael. Do you know of anyone who would like to learn English as their first language in Indonesia? I would be very surprised if there is anyone like that.
Actually, myself.
Okay. Now, how old are you, Michael?
19.
Okay. Because you're 19 and because you've finished your schooling, it is not possible for English to ever become your first language. It is just not possible. So, in a way, Michael, it is possible experimentally for parents to raise their children in a way so that their first language is English. But because you are already 19, it is not possible for you to revert your linguistic profile so that your English takes over your Bahasa or your Javanese or any other language. It is not possible anymore. However, your question was whether it is disgraceful, right?
Yes.
Yes. I personally believe it is very disgraceful if you choose a foreign language and try to retain native-like proficiency in this language, especially if you do that at the cost of your mother tongue, your first language. As Indonesians, you should be proud to be Indonesians. You should be proud to speak, Javanese or whatever local language and Bahasa Indonesia. You should be proud. English is a foreign language for you. It will never be your first language, even if you speak in an English medium school, because that is not your parents' first language. It is not possible. That is why I was asking Michael how old he is. It is possible to raise a child as a native English speaker in Indonesia, but they will have to be immersed in English, immersed. Not through formal education, through acquisition, which happens outside the classroom, 24 hours. And how impossible is that in Indonesia? But the more important thing is, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to sound American? I think if, I'm originally from Bangladesh. I've been in Australia for 23 years, but I wasn't born in Australia. My children have an Australian accent. I don't have an Australian accent, and I don't want to have an Australian accent. Because if I want to sound 100% Australian, then I'm losing my Bangladeshi identity. And I don't want to be a crow and put on the feathers of a peacock, as we say in my first language. I don't want to lose my identity. My accent is my identity. My competence in a foreign language is not my identity. So I'm not saying there is anything wrong to improve your pronunciation. Of course, we need to improve our pronunciation, but don't do that. In fact, 3 days ago, I had a keynote at PGRI Adibuana, Surabaya University. And Michael, my topic for that was the linguistic identity and the persistence of standardized pronunciation, standardized. So what I was trying to explain is that, we are talking about British accent or American accent. There is no such thing as one British accent or one American accent. There are many Americans who wouldn't understand each other. Someone from Wales wouldn't understand someone from Scotland. Someone from the deep south, the Rust Belt in America, wouldn't be understand from someone in Alaska if they speak in their local accent. So what kind of standardized English are we talking about when even native speakers can't listen to each other? So Michael, I respect everyone's choice. So if you have been making any efforts to sound or have an American accent or a British accent, if you've been trying to do that, okay, why not? But, just remember, you're Indonesian and, you should be proud to be an Indonesian. And if you're trying to sound like an American, that's the colonial mindset, which we have said goodbye to in the 70s and 80s. In fact, in the 70s, with the birth of post-colonial theories, Edward Said, Michel Foucault, we now understand that language can be an instrument of control. Why, in the first place, would an Indonesian student try to sound like an American? Why, in the first place, why? Is that colonial mentality, we want to be like them because they are superior, they're better than us, that kind of mentality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions? But for this time, I'd like to give a chance or opportunity to the students from Vocational High School Krian and also from Untung Surapati Krian. Maybe there is a questions from the students of SMK Krian 1 sama SMAK Untung Surapati Krian dan juga yang lain dari Muhammadiyah juga. Mungkin ada yang ingin bertanya? Benefit yang akan didapatkan yaitu nanti akan mendapatkan tes bahasa Inggris secara gratis. Mungkin tadi kalian sudah dijelaskan ya sama Pak Aldi dan juga Mas Adib bahwa salah satu fasilitas didapatkan yaitu kalian akan mendapatkan fasilitas tes gratis bahasa Inggris. Khusus untuk siswa-siswi yang dari SMK Krian, Untung Surapati dan juga Muhammadiyah dan juga yang lain. Mahasiswa nggak dapat ya.
Excuse me, sir. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I want to ask. My name is Ristinda. What is the benchmark for business communication? How do you know whether it is successful or not? Thank you.
Risti, thank you. Very good question. And by the way, thanks to both of you for emceeing the event. You did it in a very effortless way and in a very, very nice way. I felt very much welcome. Thank you, both of you.
You're welcome.
Right. Risti, it's a good question. What is the benchmark of good business communication? I think the benchmark is intelligibility. As long as the language you use does the job it is meant to do, that's the benchmark. So how do you know that, whether it has done the job or not? Well, in a business scenario, you are likely to have certain expectations. There is a purpose for communication, and that purpose could be to get a deal or to negotiate the price of something or to, review a proposal, business proposal, or make a tender, or write a report, do an audit, do some kind of financial activity. And as long as that has been fulfilled, you can say that you have crossed the benchmark. You have actually crossed the benchmark because your job has been done. The longer you know your business partner, the easier it is to cross the benchmark. But it is more difficult with new partners that you don't know, right? And therefore, it is important to understand the difference between when it is more important to be grammatically correct and when, it doesn't really matter. You can just, use informal language and mistakes are fine. So it's, the longer you know it. So it depends on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rakib, because the time is almost up. So I'd like to conclude based on your explanation, actually. English has become one of the most important language. For example, if you want to go to travel around the world, the first language or the main language that you use to communicate with the tourists or the citizens or the youngers or teenagers as well, on every kind of country in the world is English. It's impossible if you try to use Bahasa Indonesia or Javanese language in another country. So, and also there is a message from Dr. Rakib. Do not be afraid to speak English. That's the point. You don't have to imitate the native speaker. Just be yourself. You can say by using Indonesian accent. I go to school every day. I always say this to my students. Because most of them they try to sound like native speaker. They try to sound like British people. I think it's not really important anymore. But the most important thing is you can understand either spoken or written in English. I think that's my conclusion. And I'd like to thank once again to our speaker for today. Thank you, Dr. Rakib Koduri, for their informative and interesting presentation, and all of the participants for their active participation. I am Haris Marpurdianto as the moderator. I apologize if I made a mistake in moderating this seminar. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oke, acara saya kembalikan ke MC.
Thanks to Mr. Haris Marpurdianto, who has been moderator today. And thank you, Dr. Rakib Koduri, for the wonderful explanation. And we would like to ask you to stay on the stage because we would like to present the ceremonial gift to you for sharing your expertise in this seminar.
Baik, selanjutnya penyerahan piagam penghargaan kepada Dr. Rakib Koduri yang akan diserahkan oleh Ibu Dr. Kristiningsih selaku Wakil Dekan Bidang Akademik Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya. Kepada Ibu Christine, disilakan mengambil tempat. Berikan aplaus yang meriah. Selanjutnya yaitu penyerahan cenderamata berupa batik Gringsing Seruni Cinecek oleh Bapak James Tumewu selaku Wakil Dekan Bidang Kemahasiswaan Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya. Kepada Bapak James Tumewu disilakan mengambil tempat.
This batik is often worn by the nobility during the Majapahit era.
Konon batik ini adalah batik yang sering digunakan oleh bangsawan pada zaman kerajaan Mojopahit. Berikan aplaus yang meriah sekali lagi. Baik, kepada Bapak James Tumewu dan Ibu Christine dimohon di tempat. Selanjutnya yaitu sesi foto bersama. Kepada struktural Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Wijaya Kusuma, Surabaya, dimohon mengambil tempat untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama. Bapak Aldi, mohon maju ke depan Pak. Bapak Indra, dimohon maju ke depan untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama. Hadirin disilakan berdiri untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama. Baik, untuk para teman-teman dari SMA atau SMK yang sudah diundang bisa maju ke depan untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama dengan dan guru-gurunya juga boleh maju ke depan untuk melakukan sesi foto bersama. Dimohon untuk teman-teman jangan meninggalkan tempat ini terlebih dahulu, dikarenakan setelah ini ada absensi menggunakan link. Jadi dimohon teman-teman yang sudah datang ke sini nanti bisa mengisi link yang sudah ditampilkan di layar. Langsung aja tutup.
Ladies and gentlemen, finally we have come to the end of this interesting and informative seminar. We hope you all have enjoyed and benefit from the explanation of our special speaker. Thank you to Dr. Rokib Kaudri as the speaker today and the audience entirely. May what we had conducted will be useful for us.
Dan tibalah kita di penghujung acara pada siang hari ini. Semoga apa yang kita dapatkan pada hari ini dapat bermanfaat bagi kita semua. Kami berdua selaku Master of Ceremony yang mewakili seluruh panitia yang bertugas memohon maaf apabila ada kesalahan pengucapan dan perbuatan, baik yang disengaja maupun tidak disengaja. Bila ada sumur di ladang, bolehlah kita menumpang mandi. Bila ada umur yang panjang, bolehlah kita berjumpa lagi. Sekian dari kami berdua. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu.
Jangan kau biarkan hidup berlalu tanpa makna. Pancarkan kartikamu, memanusiakan manusia. Tabulaku sabar, sederhana, penuh syukur, menuai bahagia untuk berbagi pada sesama.